Welcome back to another video. Today, we have a scary story about something lurking beneath the floorboards. Let's dive right in. The floorboards in this old house creak every time someone walks across them. But recently, they've started to make a lot more noise than usual. And what's worse, they seem to be creaking when no one is around. At first, I thought it might be the wood settling, just part of the house breathing with the weather. But it's not random anymore. It's patterned, rhythmic, like someone is walking slowly, deliberately, from room to room. From the outside, the house looked normal. The paint was peeling away from the window sills, but that was to be expected with any home that was nearly a century old. The shingles on the roof were worn, the front steps groaned under your weight, and ivy curled along the brick foundation. But that was to be expected with any home that was nearly a century old. A gentle breeze blew through the trees surrounding the property, and the wind chimes hung from the front porch swayed gently back and forth. Their soft tinkling carried into the house like a distant lullaby, almost too delicate for the heaviness that seemed to linger in every corner of the place. But inside, something felt off. The air was always cold, no matter how high I turned up the heat. And there were moments fleeting, but unmistakable, when I swore a shadow moved just beyond my line of sight. Everything seemed at peace, almost too peaceful for Claire's liking. Ever since she had moved into the house, the floorboards had been creaking. They hadn't bothered her before, because they only made noise when she walked on them. But now, it was like they were creaking all on their own. She could hear them from downstairs, even when she was upstairs. And then there were times when she would walk across the floorboards, and they wouldn't make a sound at all. It was as though they were playing some sort of game with her, keeping her on edge, waiting for the moment when she would finally snap. She had lived alone for most of her life. Her parents had passed away when she was still in college. And after graduating, she had traveled the world. When she came back to her hometown, she discovered that the family home had been left to her. She didn't want to live there, but it would cost too much to have it torn down, so she decided to rent it out. It took her a few months to find a tenant, but eventually a young couple moved in. They were excited about living in such an old house, and Claire was happy to rent it to them. But within a year, they were gone. One day, she found a note on the door saying that they had broken up and each went their separate ways. Claire had the place cleaned out and put up for rent again, but it was weeks before she found another tenant. In the meantime, she decided to check out the house herself. The front door was unlocked, so she let herself in and started walking around. The air inside was musty, carrying the faint scent of old wood and dust that had settled over the years. Light filtered through the grimy windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. That was when she heard it for the first time, the floorboard in the living room creaking. It was a sharp, distinct sound too sudden to ignore, and loud enough to cut through the silence that had settled over the house. Startled, she froze in place, trying to listen for anything else. But there was nothing. Then she shook her head and laughed at herself. It was probably just an old house settling, she told herself. So she continued on her tour. As she walked further into the house, she began to notice strange things. The rocking chair on the porch was moving slightly. One of the paintings on the wall had been knocked askew. It wasn't dramatic, just slightly tilted, as if someone had brushed past it carelessly. But in a house where no one was supposed to have been for years, even the smallest disturbance felt out of place. She paused in front of it, staring at the faded portrait. The eyes seemed to follow her, though she told herself it was just a trick of the light. And there was a cold spot in the hallway that sent shivers down her spine. But the most disturbing thing was that she could feel eyes watching her. She tried to shake off the feeling, but the more she tried, the worse it got. She finally gave up and left the house, not wanting to spend another minute inside. But as soon as she was outside, the feeling lifted. She could breathe again. From then on, she kept the front door locked until a new tenant could be found. One evening, Claire was sitting on the porch swing when she heard the floorboards creaking again. This time, they were coming from right under her. She stood up and walked slowly inside, making sure that no one was home. She couldn't see anyone, but she could definitely hear them moving around. Then she heard a voice. It was soft and raspy, like the floorboards themselves. The sound barely registered at first, almost lost beneath the creaks and groans of the old house, but it was there persistent. It reminded her of dry wood rubbing together, or breath being pulled through a throat full of dust. Leave, it said. Startled, Claire turned around, but there was no one there. Was she going crazy? Had she been spending too much time alone? Was the stress of her job getting to her? Claire didn't know how long she stood there, listening to the floorboards creak. It seemed like hours, but it was probably only minutes. Then she heard something else. It was a scratching sound, like someone was digging their nails into the wood. She followed the sound and found that it was coming from the bedroom. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer. She tried the handle and found that it was locked. So she called out, "Hello, is anyone in there?" Still no answer. She took a deep breath and tried the door again. This time it was unlocked. She pushed it open and walked in. The room was empty, except for the scratching sound that was still coming from somewhere in the corner. Claire approached cautiously and found that the scratching was coming from behind the dresser. She pulled the dresser away from the wall and gasped. There was a small hole in the floorboards, just big enough for a small animal to crawl through. Claire peered into the hole, but it was too dark to see anything. She felt around the edges with her fingers and then reached inside and pulled something out. It was a key. She turned it over in her hands and saw that it was very old. The metal was rusty and the teeth were worn down. She didn't recognize it, which meant that the tenants must have found it and hidden it under the floorboards. But why? What was it for? Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her and whirled around. No one was there. Claire put the key back into the hole and pushed the dresser back against the wall. She didn't want to find out what was underneath the floorboards. If whatever it was could get under there, then it could also get out. And if that happened, she wouldn't stand a chance. Over the next few days, Claire tried everything she could think of to get rid of whatever was in the house with her. She played loud music, she burned incense, she even brought in holy water. But none of it worked. The floorboards kept on creaking and scratching, and the whole house shook with laughter. She could feel its presence all around her, watching her every move. She was trapped in her own home, and there was no way out. Then one night, she heard a knock on the door. She jumped and stared at the knob as if it was going to attack her. Then she slowly opened the door. Standing there was a tall, thin man with sunken cheeks and hollow eyes. He wore a long black coat that reached his ankles and a top hat that hid most of his face. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man smiled, and his teeth looked like they hadn't seen a toothbrush in years. "I'm here to take you on a tour," he said. Before Claire could respond, he stepped past her and closed the door behind him. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then she noticed that the man was floating just above the ground. His feet didn't touch the floor, and his smile grew wider. "Come on," he beckoned with a finger. "It's time to go." Claire hesitated, then took a step forward. As soon as her foot touched the threshold, she knew she had made a mistake. The air grew colder, and she felt the presence wrap itself around her like a shroud. She tried to call out for help, but her voice was gone. She couldn't scream. She couldn't run. She was trapped forever. Now, whenever Claire's name is spoken, the floorboards in the old house creak and moan in delight. Some say that she can still be heard walking the halls at night, her footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. Others say that if you listen closely, You can hear her voice whispering to you from under the floorboards, begging you to set her free. But no one has ever been brave enough to listen. If you liked this video, please leave a like. Thank you for watching.